Good evening. My name is Angel, and this is a podcast named Saying Goodbye. Um, and basically, what my vision is for this podcast is gonna be, you know, men that have grown up in tough neighborhoods all over the world that have overcome and defied the odds, um, going through all different types of brokenness and um, punishment and shortcomings, born into situations that they were impossible to overcome. And that looks different in everybody's life. There's a misconception that to be credited or to be viewed that your shortcomings or just like the grief you've been through is something that somebody else has to rate and say, nah, that's not good enough for loss, or your story's not important enough. And I believe personally that everybody's story is good enough, because we all rock on a different wavelength, and what is somebody else's trauma is not going to be necessarily my trauma. But trauma is trauma, pain is pain, suffering is suffering, and we all go through that in this life in one form or another. And we all have different measuring sticks of what that means for all of us in our lives. And for me, the direction, like where God put what God put in my heart, and like the vision of where I would like this to go, even if I reach a couple of people and they understand that they could change their lives and they can make it out of the mess and just the tarnishment and the destruction that they call life. I want to let them know that they can do that, and they can do more. So how I want to do that and how I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that by first opening up and telling my story, like where I came from, what my upbringing was. And then after I get into a lot of that, because I've been through a lot, I'm 46 years old, and I grew up in East New York, Brooklyn, and Bushwick. I was a little bit around everywhere in Brooklyn and Queens in New York. And it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what state. It doesn't matter what country. All that matters is that, like, I see you. I could see the broken you. I understand what it is to be a man and to be told, like, you don't matter. Just what you provide matters. And the honest truth, nobody gives a man his flowers until he's dead. And he can't even receive them. A man is expected to perform at all costs, like an animal in a circus. You're there to be, just to provide something. And I'm not saying that that's the situation in everybody's life. I'm just speaking what's the situation in my life and what I've been through. And, just how I felt in a lot of the situations that I was in. And, that's just my story. I'm here, like, waiting for the right moment, and time keeps passing by. And there is no right moment. There's no right time to talk and to expose, like, all your broken pieces, all the pieces that are broken in the puzzle that you call life. For me, I grew up real poor. Right? My mom was a single mom. She struggled, you know. The thing is that, like, in a lot of our homes that are poverty stricken, drugs play a major factor in, the destruction of the home and the inability to repair things in the home, because drugs become the number one priority and the kids are pushed aside. And at least that's my story. And for as long as I can remember, my mother, wherever we lived and wherever I lived with her, I just remember there was always music playing, there was always alcohol, and people were always happy and doing whatever they were doing while they were there. And then when the music was gone and there was no more drugs or alcohol, my mother figured out that using her body would get her what she needs. She actually learned that from her father, that used to get men to come into the bars. At least that's what I've heard through family growing up. And I started to learn more about my mother's story and understand as I became an adult, and I made a lot of bad decisions myself. I learned to not pass judgment so much as to try to understand, to give myself some peace. But my mother, everything was fun when we were younger, and because you're born into this atmosphere of partying and everyone coming to your house and all these things happening, you thinking that it's fun until you wake up in the morning and there's no food to eat. You're not going to school. You're not sitting down. You're not learning to read. You're not taught the fundamentals of life. You're not taught how to love, how to respect women, how to behave, how to carry yourself. You don't learn nothing about, vocabulary and education and work ethic or none of these things, and that's what my life was. It was a big emptiness. There was, a lot of things going on. As my mother continued, on her road to destruction of her life, obviously our lives were destroyed. I have myself, I'm the youngest of 3 boys, and my mother had 3 boys with 3 different men, and none of them stayed. And it's just who the men were, and it was just who my mom was. My mom wasn't gonna listen to anybody and play by anybody's rules. She wasn't a stay-at-home wife. She wasn't doing none of that shit. She wanted the streets. And I'm not trying to talk ill about my mom. I love her, and I loved her until she left here, and I was by her side. And it was important for me to be by her side, because when I needed her, she wasn't by my side, and I understood the emptiness that brought. Just so many questions and so much insecurity and so much lack of love and understanding, and a lot of self-proclaimed failure, thinking that it was my fault, and it wasn't. I was just a child growing up, and honestly, all I wanted was love, and the source from which I was supposed to get it from, I didn't get it from, and that brought on its own problems in my life still to this day. So my mom, she partied and partied and partied until it got old. And then the drugs got harder. The drugs were more, they were stronger and left her more strung out. And eventually it wasn't fun anymore. We could never keep a home. We were always moving from place to place. And my brother Booby was the oldest, and he understood the worst of it, you know. And eventually he became a teenager, and he just left, and he was out in the streets, and he really didn't want to be around my mother, and he never really had a good relationship with my mother, and he really like had this deep dislike for her. And I just never understood, because I was the youngest, and I didn't understand what it meant to like feed your children and take care of them and be responsible. And my mom, she started selling her body all the time. And then finally we lost our last apartment on Hinsdale in East New York that we really didn't even get, because my mom applied for the apartment. We got it because my uncle's wife's sister had the apartment, and then we wind up moving in with her because they like to party together and all this stuff. And then my aunt Jenny, God rest her soul, she wound up dying from an overdose. I seen her dead, you know, like in her bedroom, and the man that she was with sort of shoved her underneath the bed. Like when she died, rigor mortis, I guess, set in. Her arm was like stiff, and that's all I could see was her under the bed with her arm like just stiff. And you know, that's when things really started getting crazy. My mother, you know, crack hit. I think it was like 80, 84, 83. I was supposed to be starting school. I never went to school. You know, like we were fucked up. And you know, that's still, I didn't understand that was a bad way of living. I just understood that we were surviving. I was in survival mode. My mother was in survival mode. And for whatever reason, she wanted me to be next to her all the time. So I got a lot of the worst shit. You know, like I went with my mother when she would turn tricks. I went with my mother when we were homeless. We used to sleep in an abandoned rental truck on Pennsylvania Avenue and Pitkin Avenue. It was an Exxon gas station, and they used to have like U-Hauls and shit. And you know, my mother would leave me there, hide me under the blanket, say, yo, shut up, stay still, don't let nobody know you in here. You know, like people will kill you, they'll rape you, they'll do this. You know, she used to put the fear of God in me so that she could go turn tricks and then come back, you know, and have her fix and all that shit. I slept in schoolyards. I slept in abandoned buildings. Slept on the floor of mattresses and shit like that. Like, just wherever we could rest our head. You know, we used to survive in the summer on free lunch. And, you know, it was hard. Like, you know, my sneakers had holes. I was fucking dirty. Had long hair. And, of course, you know, I was rough. I grew up in the streets. I didn't know nothing else. It was sort of like animalistic shit. And I remember my mother, you know, like having all these different men, like having sex with men sometimes while I was around, like while I could hear her and all that shit. So the shit made me sick, man. I was like fucked up in the head. You know, I thought sexuality, like sex, was like a thing to just take advantage of women, and it wasn't a thing to be respected because my mom was doing whatever she was doing. And, you know, it was a lot of things that would come to, it would come to play a larger part of my life as I matured and as I became a man. There was a lot of things I didn't understand. You know, but I would sleep like in crack houses and on Liberty Avenue and shit. There was a couple of crack houses through there. I used to sleep in there, and dope houses, shooting galleries. And she used to do the same shit. Used to hire me in the fucking closet and tell me, yo, you know, like, the closet door comes in, like, keep your feet there. You're gonna sleep in here. Don't fucking make no noise. They'll kill you. They'll rape you. And she used to tell me the same story, you know, and I was fucking scared to death. Wouldn't make a fucking sound. Nobody would even know I was there for a day, a whole day. Scared to come out to use the bathroom or do anything. You know, shit was, it was crazy. The things that I learned as a child. And, you know, my mother used to smoke crack right in front of me. I could remember, like, if I go to the hood and I smell, and somebody smoking crack around there, I'll smell that shit. That shit brings me back to, like, when I was 4 or 5 years old. And I remember what that, you know, I remember what that smelled like. And, it's like, it's just a railroad track that brings me right back there. You know, it's still at this age, it's just things that take me right back to where I was. And you know, I remember my mother locking me and my brother up in an apartment that we lived in, that where my Aunt Jenny died, and it had like a 2-way lock, and she would lock us in there, man, for fucking 3 or 4 days, 5 days. And you know, we wouldn't fucking have, listen, I don't know if it was 100% accurate that it was 3 or 4 days, but to be fucking locked in there where you hungry enough that you fucking eating frozen hot dogs and using a knife to open up like the can of beans or baked beans and all this shit, and just trying to eat whatever bread is there, trying to, you know, fucking turn on the stove or try to cook something. Like, we were fucked up. Me and my brother and I, Anthony, we really, really went through a lot of shit. Luckily, my brother Anthony would go with my uncle and shit, and my uncle was good. He wasn't fucked up like that, you know. And you know, like I said, my mother, for whatever reason, she would take me everywhere. And you know, my mother used to beat my ass. Like, anytime I asked for food, or I said I was hungry, or somebody did something to me, and you know, like somebody was picking on me, or they hit me, or they touched me inappropriately, and if I was to say something, and you know, they would tell my mother, yo, you gotta take your kid and get out of here. Like, my mother would beat the fuck out of me for saying things. And she used to bust me down, you know, and I had to learn to shut the fuck up, keep my mouth shut. It was a tough life. It was tough growing up. You know, the first 10 years of my life, it was extremely difficult. And what's even more difficult is that I just always wanted my mother's love, and I just never got it. You know, I just wanted that love, that comfort, to know that I was safe. And I never got that. I never got, you know, that unconditional love where I felt that everything was going to be all right, because it wasn't. Nobody was coming to save me. There was nobody there. You know, it was just my mom and I, and whichever place she could get to, whatever guy she could turn to, you know, to get her next fix, to get good, to, you know, probably buy me a burger or some fries or some shit. And I remember seeing her begging and shit, and that shit was tough, man. It was tough. It was tough to see her using herself to, like, turn these guys, and being exposed to so many different men, being around her. You know, my moral compass was fucked up. You know. And, you know, eventually, they caught on that I wasn't in school. I was already 9 years old. I never went to school. I fucking couldn't read or write, really. You know, I would try to read or do whatever I could do going into school here and there. Like, they used to pass me because of my age, but I remember going to like 3 or 4 different schools and just never going to school. And You know, I don't know, the system was fucked up back then, and you know, they just couldn't keep track of everything. Everything was done by paper, and they just figured, you know, this guy went to another school or whatever, or you know, this kid just never showed up, and the mother must have sent him somewhere else, but there was never anything that happened. Eventually, by the time I had 9, they already caught wind. This kid's never been in school. Where's the mother? What's going on? Where's the address? And then finally, you know, like, they took us and they put us in foster care. And I remember going to foster care, me, my brother Anthony, and they even took Booby too. And they put Booby in an older place, and I wind up, you know, going with Anthony, and luckily we were like together. You know, and we stood there a little while, and we were waiting. Thankfully, like, my uncle was gonna come and adopt us and all this shit, and you know, we thought that we were fortunate. You know, we thought that with my uncle coming to get us, that life would be better. You know, we always hoped for my mother to change. We always wanted, like, you just want a normal life, bro. You know, you just want to get up and watch cartoons and play with your siblings and your cousins and your family and your friends. And, you know, you just want to go to school, man, and just, you know, live a regular life. And that shit never worked out for me that way, you know. So, you know, like, I could tell my story, and I could only tell my story from my point of view. You know, what I've been through, what I felt in those moments, you know, how crushed I was as a child, as a human being, just, you know, like, degraded and living a crazy life, you know. And all the lack of love, lack of food, lack of home training, lack of family, lack of healthy people around me. Like, yeah, there was a lot of shit going on that, you know, I was just lacking in most areas that were healthy. Anything that was healthy, it was not happening in my life for a long time. You know, and I don't want to blame my mother, because she's gone. You know, she's passed on, and I don't want to say, oh, you know, like, everything is her fault. And I mean, yeah, it is her fucking fault. It is her fault. And she could have been better, and she could have done things different, and she could have cared more. And I understand the disease, because the disease was passed down to me. You know, like, I learned about drugs before I knew about cooking breakfast, nigga. Like, I fucking knew what crack smelled like. You know, like, my uncle's house was a party house too. It's just different drugs. My mother's drugs were a little stronger. My mother was rock form. My uncle was powder. But my uncle's house was more violent. Definitely more violent. Put us to fight with one another. Put us to fight other kids that would come. Like, it was fucking, it became like a little crazy, you know, like, growing up in East New York, and the way my uncle was raised, it was, you know, it was wild. You know, he got us, he got his 3 kids. He finally wound up taking us out of, finally taking us out of foster care and shit. And we moved in with him. And, you know, the city gives money for that shit, for foster kids. You know, and it was fucked up. You know, we were treated in certain ways that, you know, because we weren't their kids, it was a different way of treating. I'm not saying that they used to beat me every day and it was, no, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, like, there was no love. You know, there wasn't. It was, like, they would be mad at us more often than not. I mean, I fucking came from crack houses, dope houses. I'm fucking 9 years old. Like, I'm fucked up. I need therapy. I need all types of services that I'm not getting. And and unfortunately, we went from one chaotic situation and we went directly into another. And my uncle ruled with an iron fist. I mean, I did everything wrong, bro. I had a fucking attitude. I was mad at the world. I'm mad at everything. I was taken from my mother, even though I was in the streets, and it was much better because I had 3 hots and a cop. And now I'm being fucking treated all fucked up because I don't know how to act. And it wasn't because I chose to act like an asshole. I just didn't know how to behave. I wasn't domesticated. I didn't understand rules or anything like that. I didn't understand don't eat all the food. And shit like that. And there's things that I got my ass whipped for. A lot of things I just, I didn't really, never got like a Christmas tree until like I went to my uncle's house. And that was the first Christmas tree that I really like experienced in a home. And, I wanted my uncle's love too. And, I got some of it, and we all love the Holandi, and but I got some of the worst of that shit too. I got the Holandi that when the coke ran out, and he's recovering in bed for a day or two. He's fighting with his wife. Shit is crazy. You see them getting into fist fights. My Aunt Wally was beastie too. She didn't give a fuck either. She used to fight with my uncle all the time. And we grew up watching this shit. We grew up seeing the violence. My uncle used to fight in the street, and he used to put us to fight and stop being a pussy. And my uncle used to be like, "You're gonna fight. I don't give a fuck what's gonna happen. Like, you're gonna fight." And that's, like how I grew up. I had to fight. I didn't know I was already in the fight of my life, for my life. And that I was being raised by people that had no idea what the fuck they were doing when it came to having a healthy household and raising children in a healthy environment and things of that nature. Because as a man now, like, as a man that's healing now, there's shit that I never exposed my kids to. I never, ever exposed my children to that. I love my kids, and my number one thing was to break that cycle. I didn't want to pass that on to my kids, man. I didn't want to pass down that level of violence that I had to grow up in. I didn't want them to, to be a bunch of degenerates or to have to suffer because I wouldn't get my ass up and go to work and provide for them or do things. And unfortunately, I learned the worst shit. I learned everything that was bad. I learned about dope, about crack, about selling drugs. I learned about, getting drunk at a fucking early age. By 10 years old, I was like drinking the beers that was left around and shit. I'll be fucked up. They'll see me wobbling around there. They laugh. This motherfucker drunk. They'll slap me, throw me in, get the fuck in the room. And then it's not really spoken about. Like, yo, this is a serious problem. It was more like, you got to watch that little motherfucker. He be drinking. And I see everybody else having a good time drinking this stuff. I want to drink it too. Thank God that I never picked up any heroin or cocaine or anything like that and ate it or try to like get high on it as a kid and overdosed and died. But the opportunity was there for all of that, And as a father, now going on 13 years clean, I refuse to be like my father and abandon my children. I refuse to be like my mother and allow a chemical substance, a drug, an alcohol, anything like that to get the best of me. Even though it did in the beginning, but I didn't understand that was bad. I didn't understand that getting high and doing these things was a bad thing. I thought that was normal. I thought violence, I thought that was normal. I thought, like, he's bigger than me, I'm gonna get a rock and crack his head open. Mostly I used to like to fight with my hands. And, I know that I needed a lot of help. I needed therapy. I needed psychiatry. I needed a lot of shit, man. And I just never received the help that I needed because the people that were raising me just weren't healthy enough to understand that shit. And I'm not blaming them. It was my mother that did what she did or didn't do, and I was just a product of my environment, and so we get adopted by my uncle, and living with him was tough. Like, he had dogs, we had to clean up the shit in the piss, and we had to go to the store whenever somebody needed to go to the store. If we needed to dry clothes, we had to go and do that shit. We had the chores of who's doing the kitchen. It was just me and my brother that would do the dishes because, my cousins, they were a little younger. And, we would given those tasks to get done. And, we had them tasks to do, and they used to put us in the basement to sleep. Like, we didn't even sleep with everybody else. And listen, man, they had 3 kids. I get it. There was just no, being from, like, where I'm at now, at this point in my life, and understanding that I need healthy communication with my children. My children are 27, 20, and 6. And I gotta communicate with all 3 of them on different levels. I gotta reach them and get on a common ground with all of them in a particular way, in a different way. And I have to be able to communicate with them. I have to be there for them. I have to love them because it's important for me. It's really important for me to be a good man, a good father, And growing up like that in the streets, you just gotta fight every day. You gotta fight. Everybody's trying to punk you. Everybody's in a bad situation. Everybody they don't care. It's a dog eat dog world. And that's the savagery that became my normal. That shit became my normal. I had to fight. It's not a thing where I woke up and I said, oh, well, you know what? I'm just going to fight with motherfuckers. No, it wasn't that. It was that I had no choice. I had nobody to go home to that I can have a conversation with, and, you try to be diplomatic, like, hey, man, you don't need to be using your hands. You need to learn to communicate. No, it was like, yo, bludgeon that motherfucker until he understands. And that's, like, that was just my thought process. Like, who's the bigger dog in the yard? Let's find out. And, I learned that from a young age. I learned that from a young age to be that way. We're gonna get into so many things and unpack so many things. This is just a couple of years in my life where I learned all the wrong things. I didn't understand what was healthy, what was not. I had no quality of life. I couldn't read. I couldn't write. They put me in school. Motherfuckers used to make fun of me, and you had to deal with all of that in school. Like, you were a dummy, and you was in the lowest classes, and that was, unfortunately, that was my life until I learned how to read and I learned how to write, and I got better at it by the time we hit like fourth grade, and just started getting on a level where I could at least pass my classes and things like that. And I had more drive than most, and it served me in the wrong way at first. I just used that shit to be more diabolical than the next man. I wanted to be more vicious. I wanted to hurt somebody first. I was just a broken kid. I used handball as an outlet. I loved playing handball and basketball and baseball, whatever I could do to get my mind off how terrible my fucking life was. And as we unpack my life, and as we go through the trials and tribulations of my past, and what still seems to be the little boy living inside of me that still wants love and really feels like he never got it, or he doesn't feel safe to heal enough to move on, I'm still dealing with the trauma of what was the past and burying that. And there's a lot of stuff that I work on. I got my therapist, Kate. She's a great woman, and I've been working with her for a few years, and I work on it. I'm in narcotic, I'm in NA, and I got a sponsor. I work the 12 and 12, and I'm really learning to live a different life. I'm learning to be humble, to be loving, to think about unity, things that I never thought of before in my life. I never thought about anybody else but myself, and things will get better, and things have gotten better. And as you continue to work on things, and as you continue to heal, there'll be more things that come up. This is just life, right? Yeah. And I hope to reach out to like other brothers that got stories similar to mine, to find out how they work through the things that they, how they grew through the things that they went through. Like, how did they manage their growing pains, where they're at in their lives now, like what's important to them, how are they living different, and what prompted them to do that. Like, where's the breaking point? Because a lot of us need to understand that you can have breakthrough if you continue to work on yourself, if you continue to turn inward, and you continue to let God be the center of your life. Listen, when it comes to like people being sick, I'll tell you, I got a therapist, I got a sponsor, I make meetings, I work out. Listen, I go to church, I do Bible study, I do studying of my steps, of my traditions. I go through things with my therapist that I need to reflect on. And on top of that, I'm raising my kids, and I'm living life, and I'm doing all the things that I'm doing, and it's tough, man. Even at this age, every time we think that we got like a balance in life, gotta toss you something for real and force you to grow, because it's not my will, it's his will, and this is why I am the way that I am, and I don't make no excuses today. Today's about suggestions. You understand? I don't play that. There's no excuses here. My only question is, what do we need to do to get it done? And I ask myself that question, and I get it done. I don't depend on anybody, but I do have some good brothers I could lean on. You know, that I could call, that I could talk to about some deep stuff. You know, I got a few people from church. I got a lot of people from NA. I got my sponsor. I got, you know, my son's mother. We chop it up and we talk about healing and doing things. You know, like I hurt her. She hurt me. We hurt each other. You know, she's on her own journey. I'm on my own journey. And it's a beautiful thing to communicate. You know, and a lot of us, I know I didn't know how to communicate for a long time. And I still struggle with it, but I've gotten way better. And I want to be here for people to understand that you don't got to be perfect, man. Because it ain't perfect. It's perfectly messy. And that's okay. You just don't do the same shit you did yesterday. You put one foot in front of the other, and you will start getting to where you want to go. Understand what it is that's important to you, what you want to achieve, and start sacrificing and start having discipline in your life and start working on some things and ask people that are doing better than you, how could I get there? You know? And this is just one episode of what's probably going to be a 5-part series just about my life. I've been through a lot, and there's a lot to unpack. I hope that, you know, I could put this out and that you can understand, whoever you are, wherever you are, that you could understand that we are the same. You and I are the same. And we need each other, man. Because as strong as I am, I can't do this shit alone, man. I can't. And I refuse to do it alone. It's no fun. It's no, you know, life ain't meant for us to do alone. Life is meant for us to do in community. And after COVID and the street code and all the bullshit that you fucking fed throughout the years, like, oh, you gotta be hardcore and you gotta do this alone, that's fucking bullshit, man. That's meant to keep us separated, segregated, and just on a slope of continuous failure. And I refuse to be that way, because we got to try different things. If you do what you always done, you're going to get what you always got. And if you continue to do the shit you've been doing for years that hasn't worked for you, guess what? It's going to continue not to work. And I'm not judging you. I'm saying I did that shit. I went to college at fucking 33 years old. I didn't go to college at 18. I didn't graduate high school. I didn't do all that shit. I didn't get to go to my high school prom. You know, I didn't get to have a high school girlfriend and, you know, live this good. I didn't have none of that shit. None of it. But when I understood what I needed to do to live a better life, to stop the bleeding, stop the pain, you know, then and only then, we learned that from each other. You learn that from another brother doing better than you, another brother you need to help pull up, and being in community, and somebody saying, hey, yo, that's not the right way to go. And if you open-minded enough and you're willing to do what you have to do, and it's important for you and you want to change, you could change your life at any given day, on any given day, at any time. It don't matter, because there's no good day to quit getting high. There's no, you know, there's no day to accept that you are the destructor in your life, because whatever your circumstances were growing up, now you in charge and you keeping that destruction going. And you know it's time for a change. And even with 12 years, 8 months, and 3 weeks clean, I still make poor decisions. And I still don't do the right thing sometimes. And that's a part of me being human. But you know what? Whatever I did wrong today, I won't do it wrong tomorrow. And I try to keep it simple. And just want to give myself some grace, and I pray to God and I give all the control. He's the one in control of my life, because I'm not. Because when I had the control, I blew my life up. TNT, yeah, I went and stole all that shit and just blew my whole life up and just tear everything up everywhere I went. And that's the truth about my life. That's the truth about what I learned, what I absorbed, and what I displayed. And, eventually nobody wanted to be around me. And I understand why. I was completely psychotic. Everything was wrong with me. Not some things. Everything. I was just somewhere else. And I needed help. And, now, through the things that I've gone through, I hope that I could let somebody else know that just because they didn't love you doesn't mean that you can't love yourself and that you're not worth that love. Just because they didn't raise you right or they abandoned you doesn't mean that we should abandon ourselves. It doesn't mean that we got to go and run away too. We got to start being here for each other. And this is why I'm starting this podcast. This is why it's rough. I'm in an attic. I'm recording in a friend's house, and I'll be in different places. I don't care. The point is that we need to start talking about it. We need to start being there for each other. We need to start showing each other love. Not just punching each other in the face or killing each other or cutting each other, stabbing each other or talking bad about each other. Like, we don't need that shit no more. We did what we had to do to survive. It's time to start living. It's time to start living. And I don't got it all figured out. Because somebody that's all tore up will be able to see shit that I can't. And be like, yo, hey, you're going in the wrong direction. And I'm humble. And I'm willing to have those conversations. I'm willing to have guys come on the podcast and we could talk about things. We could disagree about things. And we could come to some type of agreement. And, I just pray that if you are hearing this, listening to this, seeing this, that that you could relate to some part of this, and that you could come on this journey and you could see like what I've been through, and you could hear what I've been through, and you could feel what I've been through. You could hear the brokenness in my voice, in my heart, in my spirit. But you could also hear the fulfillment of God in my lungs, like the way he embraced me and took me out of where I was, and that I'm no longer the man that I used to be. And I continue to make mistakes, and I continue to make poor decisions. And I'm going to continue to be human, but I'm going to always show up. I'm not going to get high no matter what. And I'm humble enough that I could be accountable for when I'm wrong. I could say, you're right, I'm wrong. And I apologize, I shouldn't have did that. And moving forward, I won't do that. Because things on here, they're going to be said. Things on here, it's not going to be, oh, let's fact check or let's do this. No, that's bullshit, man. This is my life. This is about our emotions. This is about how we're viewed by the world. This is about, like, how we're treated, how we're not treated, how we're loved, how we're not loved. You know, somebody told me that the biggest form of love is consideration. Damn, man, and that, talk about consideration. I'll jump through hoops for people, for anybody, for anything, you know, help. I'm willing to help anybody. And, you know, a lot of times you're just not appreciated for it. There's no consideration, like how you feeling and how I would give, like, my last to help somebody else out, because I'm strong enough and I'll be able to find another way. And sometimes other people aren't at the moment and they need help. You know, I need help, you need help. I'm saying let's help each other. Just because I'm on here and I'm talking about my life and I'm having a little bit of courage to talk about my shortcomings and my tough life, and I'm willing to put it out there. Listen, this is all God's work. I'm just a vessel. You know, things were put in my heart like, hey, you got to go and you got to talk to people. People need to hear your story, because people need to understand that it's okay. So you don't have to be perfect. And it's okay, you could change your life even though you're doing the wrong things. You know, tomorrow, if you wake up, you'll have the same 24 hours like me. And you can start making your changes. And you can start being different. You know, and that is a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing. You know, hopefully on the next episode, I'll start diving into what it was like being adopted by my uncle, and I'll just continue to go through the segments of my life. And then after we get through it, you'll find out where I'm at in my life today and how beautiful it is, and it has been, to come out on the other side. Because if God decided that today's my last day, bro, I tell you, I ain't complaining, because it's been a beautiful, beautiful life. No matter how much I've been through, I appreciate it all, because it made me the man that I am, going through what I went through. You know, I'm going to start putting this podcast together. I'm going to start getting some good brothers to come on here so that we could chop it up. We're going to start having some topics. You know, hopefully we could get people to start leaving comments and start, you know, just being more involved, because we all need to come together to be better for one another, so we could all grow and we could love on one another and help each other in this process, because we all have something important that somebody needs to hear. It don't matter if you're homeless. It don't matter what happened, your circumstances. It don't matter where you at financially, because I'll tell you, man, I got a few dollars. And that shit don't make me no happier, man. Yeah, I'm able to buy something to eat. I'm able to help my kids out. But inside of me, that brokenness inside of me is still there. I can't take the money and fill it. I can't. I thank God for what I got, but that doesn't equal healing. Money doesn't mean anything when you're trying to heal. It doesn't. And with that, we're going to close this first session. Thank you for hearing me out. If you heard me out, thank you for checking it out a couple of times. And I hope to see you guys on the next episode. All right. Saying goodbye. Podcast for Men by Angel. And I salute you guys, and I hope to see you guys on the next one, so we could get deeper into this and we could find some healing together. God bless you guys. Stay safe.